talk about this. Let's talk about this demolition of the White House East Wing that has been going on. And we're not going to talk about it from the 3D news perspective. No, I'm going to be doing some script flipping with you as far as reading it through the eyes of the 5D psychic highlights. That's what I would like to do with this. If you are new to me, I am a working psychic medium, Dana Stover, and I have been doing this work for over 20 years now, on Spiritual Path for 25 years, so I've got a lot of experience behind me. And I usually use my psychic mediumship work in body-based money relationship, and more recently, my spirit team has been guiding me to use my psychic mediumship abilities with color mediumship healing. It is a thing. If you're interested in any of the work that I'm doing, I will have offers and more description at the very end of the video that you can go take a look at. Let's dive into the deep end of the pool with this monstrosity that has been going on recently. And so, like so many people, I saw the headlines on this and I had a whole, I had the intake of the breath. I had my triggers. I definitely did the political pearl clutching of like, oh my God, they're ripping apart the White House. What are they going to do next? I definitely had that 3D trigger thing happen. It impacted me. Once I rolled through that and recovered a little bit and walked away from it, the story kept tweaking at me. Like, and there was a feeling of like, Dana, you need to go back and take a look at that. And I'm like, oh, okay. So opened it back up again. I went in and did what I do, where I do my psychic mediumship and I look at the headlines and the information, and I do that spidey sense 5D. What is this really about? Like asking spirit world, asking the energies, what is this really about? And the word I heard was deconstruction. Deconstruction, not demolition, not destruction, but deconstruction. And we know at this point that deconstruction is about peeling back the layers and looking at the inside of it. And when I somatically engaged with this, a very disturbing photo that I had gone through the pain of it first, the trigger and the pain, but then staying present with it and going, oh, what is this really about? And the whole deconstruction thing, then there was a feeling of like, follow the energies. Follow the energies. Well, in our 3D world, there's that whole thing about like follow the money. And that totally is true. That totally is true. But in my world, in psychic mediumship world, there's the thing of like follow the energies. Pay attention to the energies. What are the energy threads going on? And so that's what I started to do. And this is where they led me as far as a deconstruction. And what became very clear to me is that the president is physically, symbolically dismantling a part of the White House that is very much in reflection with this whole thing that he's doing with dismantling or trying to dismantle a lot of the government. So that first 5D psychic hit was like, oh God, he's symbolically doing to the White House what he has been trying to do with the United States government. And so to me, like, that tracks. And then there was a feeling of like, keep going. And what I began to put together, and this is going to be some back history, some backstory, because I've been on the path for quite a while. I've seen a lot of things come and go. Like you could say I've seen it all, but I haven't seen it all because 5D is kicking up a lot of dust right now. And there's a lot of very interesting energetic things going on that are brand new. But this pulling on these threads, this actually took me back, not forward. And it took me back to right around 2001 when I had my own psychic awakening, when the Twin Towers came down and click, 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 turn on all my cellular code and all my psychic lights lit up. That was the energy that I was living in during that time. And me and my mentor, Linda, at that time, for a good handful of years, we were following some of the primary channels of that day. And one of them being Lee Carroll, who channeled Cryon. And Cryon basically came back and said repeatedly, and there were other channels who were also repeating many of the same types of things, and it was basically them saying that at the end times, the establishment would be dismantled. The establishment would have a major deconstruction happen. And we're there. We're there. We all see it. At the end of the Mayan calendar, 2012, that was the leaping off point. Every consecutive year has gotten more crazy, not less crazy, because there's actually more light on the planet, more vibration on the planet, more ascension is happening. And so deconstruction of a lot of the old ways is going on, in a lot of those institutions and the way things have been done, and there's new energy rolling onto the planet. And I know most of the attention right now, it goes to the 3D and all of the terrible, awful things that happen. I will not take that away from you. It is definitely part of the walk we're doing right now, is the shadow world of 3D and things coming apart. But I want to remind you that at the same time, there is this massive wave of energy of 5D that is also happening at the same time that we have access to work with for different options and resourcing in our life. We're doing both at the same time right now. And I know it's a little bit crazy making, but rewinding back to 2001 when those channels were going on and we were being told, hey, there's going to be a great dismantling, a disengagement, of things coming apart at the end times, the end of the old, the beginning of the new, that's what would be taking place. So we got warned this 20 years ago, folks, if not long before that. Like, this was me when I came onto the scene 25 years ago, okay? And so today, we fast forward now today to this photo and what the current regime is doing, pulling this apart. I kind of had that flashback to 25 years ago of all those channels, and then flash forward to today of this demolition going on, or I should say this deconstruction going on. And I'm like, it fits lockstep. And the people who are doing this could not be following the script better as far as the end of the end times and the beginning of the new times. And this is kind of where I want to hit the pause button before I pull on this other really powerful thread that we need to take a look at. And that is, I did use my spidey sense to take a look at this demolition going on. And I had that feeling, that eerie feeling of oh my God, they're going to get this thing pulled apart and then something else happens. And then it's just going to stay as a gaping opening. I had that feeling of I don't know that thing is going to get completed the way they want to have it completed. And that's when I ran a pendulum check, and I straight up asked my pendulum. I was like, are they going to complete the new ballroom? Are they going to be able to do that? And you know what my pendulum did? It swung in circles. There was not a no. There was not a yes. There was this huge, very powerful circle going on, which confirms to me the energy that I keep getting off of the headlines of yeah, this thing is going to implode from the inside out. And then we are going to be left with the bag to recreate our brand new government. That's what we need to be prepared for. This winter is fallout. It's more fallout. It's more shadow. It's more ugly. And then somewhere around in the middle of it, we're going to need to be ready to pick up the bag and move ahead to create the new. And that's what this is all about. End times of old establishment things going away, clearing the space for new things to begin to grow and rise in the 5D. And this right here could not be a better representation of the heart of what's going on inside of our government with all of that. Everything that I have said up to this point, I would say not earth-shattering news in the psychic and spiritual community. I bet most of the people who in the psychic and spiritual community watching this are going yep, Dana, you're not telling me anything I don't already know. My hope is that I am just giving you the reminder to look through your viewfinder at this from a symbolic picture and not so much a 3D picture. so we can loosen our load on our 3D triggers and take a much wider view of this, right? Now, me, along my own path, I've gone through my triggers. Spirit team is like, take a second look at it. I do that, and I'm like, oh, I'm beginning to see the 5D picture and putting 2 and 2 together with old information from 25 years ago. Those channels connected up to now. Like, I've gotten that whole package done. Like, I moved through all of that, and I'm like, I'm good to go. And Spirit team is like, not so fast. You're missing a thread. And I'm like, what thread am I missing? And it took me a couple of hours, and I had that thing happen in the back of my head. You start having, memories about, like, there's information going on, like, what is it that I'm missing? And then it just, like, of course, full rush came through. And that is, here's where we really put it together. And that is, who built the White House? Who built the White House? Sure, there were the people in the power, and sure, there was an architect, and yes, there was an architect assistant, but whose labor, whose blood, sweat, and tears, whose blood and money, whose back and shoulders and body went into building this thing of the White House? It was enslaved Black African American men. Slaves built our White House. And this so flies under the radar, and it so does not get recognized, and yet it is there as a pulse, as a continued pulse always, that our quote-unquote house that houses the leader of the free world is the hypocrisy that this house was built by enslaved African American men. And so, like, I sat with that for a little while as it reverberated, and I was like, oh my God, that's right. So I looked that up, and I started going through some records, and I will read. There is one website I am going to read to you verbatim because it is heartbreakingly true. And if there's anything we need to do while this building is having the East Wing demolished, we need to know some of the history of how the White House came into being in the first place. And we need to know the truth, even as there are certain people that are trying to strip a lot of this truth away. So we're going to do that. But there's a couple more steps I need to walk you through on this. Okay, so I'm sitting there reverberating with that knowledge. I'm beginning to go through some websites, reading up on it, more of the details, more of the particulars. So just so I know what's going on with all of this. And that's when it hits me. That's when the boom of the 5D psychic mediumship message hit me. And that is a known white supremacist. The leader of all the white supremacists right now is voluntarily pulling apart the energy of slave labor right in front of our eyes. This deconstruction right now, and I'm going to get into some details about the East Wing in just a moment, but from a symbolic, energetic perspective, the leader of white supremacy right now is voluntarily dismantling a representative structure of slave labor in our country. Stop and think about that for a second. And I really want you to take that in, that from an energetic, symbolic perspective, and remember, in my world, energy precedes manifestation, right? Okay, so if energy precedes manifestation, that means our current regime leader, who is a known white supremacist, leader of white supremacy, he is voluntarily deconstructing a symbol of what slavery created. He's voluntarily doing that. No one is making him do that. And so when I arrived at that place of like, oh my God, he's pulling the plug and pulling the energy out of all of that energy of enslavement. He's beginning to pull the energy of enslavement out of that building by what he's doing with that great big old gaping hole on the east side of the White House. Like, as I took that in, I really I reverberated with that whole thing. I'm like, oh my God, he doesn't even know what he's doing. And he's doing it voluntarily. And I could just feel so many different things shifting, right? And we're not done yet. We're not done yet. Oh, there's another piece of the action here. And that is, I remembered from those channels some 20, 25 years ago, one of the things that came through in those channels, I very clearly remember them saying, is that our country, the United States of America, our country, would not be able to move forward and stay together unless everyone in the country was able to recognize, acknowledge, and embrace the slavery that happened in our country that created an economic fortitude here that we would not have had were it not for slavery. Like, there is no full recognition of that. Like, we would not have been able to economically stand on our feet were it not on the blood money and backs of the African Americans, the ancestral roots who came across the ocean unwillingly, who provided free labor for us. You know, so that's number one. The channels that Cryon and other, you know, and that other entities are basically saying, they were like, if we don't have a full embrace of that, we're not going to be able to move forward as a country. And you see that going on. You see a whole bunch of people going, la, 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 there was no such thing. And there really is such a thing. The number two piece is the fact of recognizing and acknowledging and embracing the fact of the genocide of the Native American Indians in North America here, and that our country was founded on the death and torture and genocide of the Native American Indian population that happened at the founding of our country and, quite frankly, still continues today. Those practices are not out of vogue. They continue to be in vogue to keep the indigenous population here in the United States squashed. Right, so that's number two. I'm going to call in a 3 and a 4 that I think is pretty obvious, and that is the free labor that women have put in because of misogyny, the free physical labor and the free emotional labor that we are all coming up for air on now. So that I would call that the number 3 acknowledgement. And the number 4 acknowledgement is the great and beautiful presence of the LGBTQIA+ community. So these 4 peoples, basically the channels said, needed to be recognized for our country to be able to move forward as a whole. And if we did not do that, we would fall apart. And that is exactly what we're seeing right now. We are seeing a falling apart happening right now because there's a certain part of the establishment that is trying to indoctrinate a certain white male colonial way of being in our country. And the rest of the population, quite frankly, there's so much more of a majority of us than them. We're ready to move forward in another direction. And this is the stopgap that we're at. And the channels from 20, 25 years ago, they nailed it. They nailed it. And so we are seeing the great coming apart happening right now as we come to terms with all of this. And I just find it so fascinating that in the middle of it, the leader of white supremacy decided to symbolically pull apart the major house that has held the energy of enslavement from the beginning. He's pulling the threads on that, and the energy is all coming out of it. And I want to put attention to that. And I just want to take pause and make nod to a couple of details, because there's some people out there who might be going, but Dana, what about? And that is, one of the clarities that I need to make here is that this East Wing that is being dismantled right now, let's get clear on some dates, because I think that's pretty important. So let me share this with you. The East Wing was technically not built until 1902 by Theodore Roosevelt as an entryway to the White House. And then FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, in 1942, he expanded that building to include offices, and we know the First Lady's office is there, and some other administrative offices which have been demolished. And there was also an underground bunker put into place, and that was for World War II. And so actually the East Wing that is being dismantled right now, is not part of the quarters that enslaved black men built. It is not. It is part of that greater building. I just want to clarify that when I started having all this information roll through me, I was like, holy cow. And then I started looking it up and I'm like, yeah, but the East Wing wasn't built until the early 1900s, right? But the feeling that I get from Spirit World is like, it's still all part of the same building. There's an energetic domino effect there. And there's still the symbolism of a certain white supremacist leader pulling apart the energy of a primary building for the leader of our country that was built on the backs of black enslaved men. So I think the symbolism still stands, but I do need to be clear about those few details for the people who might nitpick on me. And rightly so. We got to be clear about our facts here. The next two things that I want to get into, I want to read to you the passage about the building of the White House, because as I began reading this morning, my knees went weak, my stomach felt funny, I got weepy. Like the thought of the founding of our country and what happened there with the White House, it makes me sick. And we need to be aware of all of this. And then coming out of the backside of the meaning of all of this and the potential dismantling of the White House, I want to begin to plant a seed. I want to begin to plant a very conscious seed about how we house our leaders in our country moving forward after we go through this great deconstruction process in our country right now. But first, I want to read to you this passage. All right, so just to be clear, we are at the White House Historical Association website. There is the address. So let's start from the top, and I'm just going to read until Spirit Team tells me enough, and then you can go look up the rest. But basically, construction on the President's House began in 1792 in Washington, D.C., a new capital situated in sparsely settled region far from a major population center. Yeah, this was in the middle of the woods, guys, believe it or not. Construction on the President's House began in 1792. The decision to place the capital on land ceded by two states that permitted slavery, Virginia and Maryland, ultimately influenced the acquisition of laborers to construct its public buildings. The commissioners for the District of Columbia, charged by Congress to build a new city under the direction of President George Washington, initially planned to import workers from Europe to meet their labor needs. However, response to recruitment was dismal, and soon they turned to African Americans, enslaved and free, but primarily enslaved, to provide the bulk of labor that built the White House, the United States Capitol, and other early government buildings. So this is not just primarily for the White House. It's a good bit of the District of Columbia. Most of these enslaved laborers were hired out from slave owners from Southern Maryland, Northern Virginia, and Washington, D.C. on a contract basis. And get this, the owners collected a wage from the commissioners while providing clothing and some medical care to the enslaved laborers. The commissioners typically provided workers with housing, 2 meals per day, and basic medical care. That's right, folks. These enslaved laborers worked, and then their wages went to their owners. Then a major concern in the construction of the new public buildings in the undeveloped federal city was the acquisition of building materials such as stone, lumber, bricks, hardware, and nails. Enslaved African-American quarrymen, sawyers, brickmakers, and carpenters fashioned raw materials into the products used to erect the house, the White House. Enslaved people were trained on the spot at the government's quarry at Aquia in Stafford County, Virginia, 40 miles south of Washington. There they quarried and cut the rough stone that was later dressed and laid by Scottish stone masons to erect the walls of the president's house. Over 200 known enslaved individuals labored to build the White House and the Capitol building, and over 100 other known enslaved people worked in presidential households. Wage rolls for May 1795 list 5 enslaved people. just first names, Tom, Peter, Ben, Harry, and Daniel, 4 of whom were owned by White House architect James Hoban. Daniel was owned by Hoban's assistant, Pierce Purcell. I let that sink in. Let that sink in. These are our people, and this is what we did to them. Then get this. The majority of the early presidents were slave owners, and most brought their enslaved workers to the White House as a means to save money on domestic staff. There's that free economic step up. The president's salary was initially $25,000, a lot of money for the time, but all expenses for the house, including wages for the servants, were expected to come out of that amount. It was not enough to maintain the house properly, so there was no realistic way an individual president could afford to keep up the house without either enslaved staff or extensive personal wealth. According to surviving documentation, at least 9 presidents either brought with them or hired out enslaved individuals to work at the White House. Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, James Monroe, John Quincy Adams, Andrew Jackson, Martin Van Buren, John Tyler, James K. Polk, and Zachary Taylor. According to surviving documentation, at least 13 presidents were slave owners at some point during their lives. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, James Monroe, Andrew Jackson, Martin Van Buren, William Henry Harrison, John Tyler, James Polk, Zachary Taylor, James Buchanan, Andrew Johnson, and Ulysses S. Grant. Enslaved individuals worked in a variety of positions in the president's household, including as chefs, gardeners, stable hands, maids, butlers, ladies' maids, valets, and more. Enslaved individuals working in the White House often slept in the attic or in the rooms along the ground floor corridor. Their living arrangements varied by administration. Accounts suggest these spaces were uncomfortable with extreme temperature disparity. In particular, the ground floor level was often damp and rodent infested. I'm going to stop here, but there is more. There is so much more, and I really encourage you to come read through this, because this is our nation's history, and the people in the White House would rather us not know about any of that. So knowing all of this that I've already talked about, some of it may be controversial, maybe some of it not for you, don't know, but I'm now going to drop something that I consider is probably pretty controversial, and I can't not complete this video without saying this, because we need to bring this into full fruition here. And this is the full-on 5D script flip of this whole thing. So knowing everything that I've talked about up to this point, if it is not apparent to you, it is very apparent to me that how can we move into new times in 5D? How can we move into a new time and space, especially after we go through all of this shadow chaos that we're going through right now? How can we move into that new time and continue to house our leadership in quarters that were both built by and run by slaves? And more specifically, Black-skinned African-American slaves. People who had families and their lineage went on, and so now in everyday America, you may know some of these people who have ancestors, the ancestral line, who dates back to this time and that space in history. You may know people who have ancestors who were slaves in the White House. And so to me, it makes a lot of sense, especially as we move into a new time of 5D. How can we continue to have that building? And so this is where I voice a 5D script flip of either there's got to be a full acknowledgement of the enslaved people who made it possible to have that White House and run that White House, or the whole thing's got to come down and it's got to be built new. It's got to be built fresh on much fresh ground and new ideology, and acknowledging what happened, but stepping into a new space. And I'm of the mind that our current regime has actually started that process right here by dismantling part of the White House unknowingly and beginning to dismantle some of that old energetic slave energy, enslavement energy that is there, that quite frankly, we can't walk forward as a nation unless we recognize what happened, and or we do something about completely transforming it. So the people are honored and the lineages are honored, and we create in a new space so that never happens again. I mean, we're at a point where we need not a White House, we need a UN rainbow-styled government space for housing our leadership that recognizes all the different facets of diversity in our country at this point that has made and makes our nation so amazing is the diversity. That's what I'm going to leave you with, and I just want to remind you that as you see images of this, I want you to begin to think about, how do we reframe it? How do we reframe it? How do we reframe it? Like I promised at the front end of the video, I do want to share a little bit more about who I am, what I provide, and some of the offers that I've got for you right now if you'd like to work with me. And that is, my name is Dana Stover, and I am founder and coach of Body-Based Money Relationship. I have been doing that since about 2012. I am one of a handful of coaches doing body-based money relationship in the country, and I have a full-on system for how that all works at this point. You know, and I have a free opt-in on my homepage, somaticmoney.com, if you want to go check that out. Number two, my spirit team recently has had me doing a lot of psychic mediumship in different areas of like talking with deceased loved ones. I have also been doing quite a bit of work with helping people get their intuitive gifts online. If you want to begin to check out a little bit of that work, I've got the Notable People mediumship thing going on there. And if you want a psychic medium session with me, I don't have a page where you can order. You just simply email me. You just say, hey, you know, Dana at somaticmoney.com. Hey, Dana, I would love a mediumship reading. This is what I would like. Give me a bid on it, and I'll get in touch with you on that. And the third area that Spirit Team has me working on that is such an anomaly, and it's pretty wonderful, and I really want people to begin to pay attention to it because it's kind of like what is she doing? And that is, my Spirit Team has been having me put together my color and my art together with my psychic mediumship skills to provide healings. So think about it like this: color, art, psychic mediumship, healing, all put together in one spot. And I've started creating some products and some things that you can begin to participate in. They are on my website, somaticmoney.com. You can go check those out. You can either DIY it with these programs for not that much money, or you can commission me to do your own color, energy, art, healing video with the actual art itself. I am beginning to do that. It's some pretty exciting stuff. All right, so that's what I've got for you for now. Thank you for being here, and by God, make sure you keep walking forward to meet those miracles along the way, and I will see you in my next video.